Greetings, nerds. This is CNN Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing tonight, Will?
Doing very well, Sarah. It's feeling like Alaska here, but doing very well.
How cold is it?
It got down. Let's see. The lows the last couple of nights have been down in the 20s, and the high struggled to get out of the 30s yesterday. Today seemed to be actually colder, even though I think it was apparently warmer. But I was just like, all right, that Arctic blast. Sarah, thank you very much for it. Appreciate it.
Hey, the roads were awful. Well, they weren't awful today, but we're getting snow right now. So I'm fine right now because it's not below zero, but we're right at that point where it alters throughout the day. It's one above and then two below, one above. So we're about to enter our cold spell. So we'll see what happens. Meanwhile, you watched. So did you watch The Mandalorian first on Disney Plus, or did you go straight into the world according to Jeff Goldblum?
So I watched Mandalorian first, of course. I have to do that, but it's amazing with this app. So I guess the first day I had 3.2 million first day downloads and over 10 million subscribers. I mean, I know people were like excited about it, but I didn't really fully grasp it, how excited people were. And also, I guess I had my preconceived notions as far as what this platform is going to be about. And so I honestly wasn't prepared for all the options and the catalog that was available. But I definitely watched The Mandalorian first, and then I started playing around, indulged in a bit of 90s nostalgia, watching the original, not the original, but the 1990s Spider-Man.
Yeah. I think that it's amazing how much content there is in the world these days in terms of entertainment, and yet still Disney Plus drops and it gets 3.2 downloads on the first day.
Yeah.
Isn't that's the crazy part to me, is that despite so much content already happening, we have our Netflix, we have our Hulu, we have our Amazon, we have regular movies, we have all of these TV shows and everything, and yet still another streaming service comes and everyone's like, oh, are people going to really need that? And I do think Mandalorian was a draw to push it over, but I still think it could do half, if not 3/4 of what it did without Mandalorian, just because, and you said it best, the catalog. You don't realize how much is in that catalog until you purchase that app and you start looking, and suddenly all the nostalgia comes back. And I love how they've also sectioned it in terms of decades. And I was just looking, I'm like, that is so funny, because you can literally sit down with somebody and be like, we're going to watch all the 80s movies and then the 90s, and the dorks we are, of course, we would do something like that.
Of course.
It's just like a time travel machine.
It really is. It's totally a time machine. Like I said, looking at the catalog and seeing some of those old classics and things I haven't watched, honestly, since I was a kid. And I'm like, oh, okay. Let me add this to the watch list, and let me add this to the watch list, and then of course the original programming. I know you joked about me watching the World According to Jeff Goldblum, but that was actually, so I know right before we started recording, we were talking about how a lot of folks had obviously reviewed The Mandalorian, and a lot of the sameness was coming through, and hope as far as people's thoughts, but. One thing that did break through for me was someone talked about the Jeff Goldblum show, and I had forgotten about it. Honestly, I remember when it was first talked about at D23, at least the first time I had heard about it, but I had forgotten all about it. After D23, and so I heard someone talk about it, and I was like, okay, let me go check this show out, and it was amazing. I loved it. I mean, I was just about as hyped with it as I was with Mandalorian. It was just, obviously Jeff Goldblum is Jeff Goldblum.
Right.
And but the topic was sneakers, like sneakers. He went to a sneaker con, which I kind of laughed because this past weekend I went to our Comic-Con, but I mean the whole backdrop of sneakers and how it's a multi-billion-dollar business and the collectible nature of Jordans and everything else, and it was just and his, of course, it was a documentary, but his own quirky personality on top of National Geographic type of setup, and it was just very fluid. And it was an hour long, but it went by very fast.
Yeah, I think also what you're getting at is the fact that they could have just released 2 or 3 new Star Wars shows, because they own the rights and it's their world and it's their playground, and they know that's what viewers want. Well, what viewers want even more is diversity, in terms of content and the ability to have not only a Star Wars show, but this weird following the life of a celebrity and it not be a talk show, but kind of be a talk show, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Those are the kind of niche things that I think they took a page from Netflix in terms of original content. And it was like, okay, let's not do the DC universe, which is all DC shows, which is very comic book genre centric, to the point where when we talk about DC, the DC app, we always compare those shows together. Or CW is another example.
Right.
It feels like the same show again and again, different characters, different plot lines, but it's still the A, B, and C of it all is very procedural. So it feels like you're drinking the same Kool-Aid again and again. With the Disney app, is you have these few original content that's very different brands and reaches a wider audience and appeals more, and also doesn't make you feel like you've had too much,
Exactly.
It's just enough, because we're going to get the final installment of the Skywalker saga next month. So we can only get so much Star Wars exhaust on it. So I think that's also a great point that you brought up with your whole dive into Jeff Goldblum. So what's going on with Beverly Hills Cop 4?
Yeah, so Netflix and Paramount brokered a deal where Paramount's licensing out the Beverly Hills Cop 4 movie to be developed by Netflix. And Eddie Murphy's coming back, and I guess he's riding the hot wave of My Name is Dolomite, which I need to see. And definitely need to see that. But I think the bigger thing for me, that the takeaway for me with this one is, we've had these franchises like Terminator, Dark Fate, and others, also Men in Black, where they have tried to do the big feature film release and have underperformed at the box office. So I think it's Paramount's kind of hedging their bets here and playing it safe by just distributing it directly to Netflix instead of trying to do a grand release, because you don't want to have a big name franchise like the Beverly Hills Cop, which 1 and 2 were great. 3, but you don't want them to suffer the same box office fate as some of the other name franchises have lately.
Yeah, and Adam Sandler, everybody, ever since the last few blockbusters he's dropped, he's kind of gone the Netflix route, so he can still make his movies the way he wants to make them. And apparently there's an audience because they continue to release them, and he has the deal and everything with Netflix. So Eddie Murphy may be thinking the same thing in his mind, along with Paramount. And to each their own. They're right now, due to the streaming services, due to the block. I'm going to say it like this. Due to the impact of the MCU on what films do well and what films don't. I think we're talking about event filmmaking where people really still, they want to go to the movie and not to get disappointed. So buzz is everything. I mean, the Joker, it's already past $1 billion, and that's partly because there was such a buzz about it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you leading up to its release, you could not watch an entertainment show that was covering movies or film or TV show or entertainment in general without it being brought up. Like you just couldn't. And then people started seeing it and the reactions, and everyone wants to be a part of that, you know, wants to say, no, I have seen it and I agree. So that is what drove a lot of people to the cinema. Beverly Hills Cop 4, it doesn't have that because we've seen it 3 times.
Right. Yeah.
Decades ago, and so I think it's playing it safe, and I think it's also very strategic because they want to do it. They have another story to tell, and sometimes you just have to go the other route. Speaking of Netflix, season 3 of The Crown will drop this weekend. And instead of aging the cast, they've done a complete turnover. We all know this. My expectations are, I am trying to get some coursework done. So I don't know how much I'm going to watch. And I say this every time there's a Netflix drop because I know they drop them all at once. Right. And I always start and then I just need to finish it. And it's like coursework. So I'm excited. It's The Crown. I don't care. The actors and the actresses, they have given us such a significant amount of time to be prepared to turn on The Crown and not expect to see the actors and actresses that we're used to. Yeah. That I've been ready for it. I think it's really going to be cool that Diana's going to appear. Like, that's honestly what I'm really excited about, is to see that character and that story, because I feel like the first 2 seasons, I really understood the length of the reign. I mean, we all know Queen Elizabeth, right? Mm-hmm. And for my entire life, she has always been the old lady over in England. Yeah. But there was a time when she was young.
Yeah, exactly. And it was fascinating how they explored her story and Prince Philip's story in their youth. And so it is in this next phase of the reign, and getting into sort of more contemporary times as far as what we've known of them, at least for our generation. I'm looking forward to it as well. And yes, there is the whole class turnover instead of going around of aging the actors, given that we've had all these conversations of, people getting de-aged and doing a wholesale swap out. But I think just the way they have constructed the show, I think it won't be distracting. It'll just sort of be like, oh, this is a sort of natural evolution of things.
Right. Exactly. I completely agree. I am not worried about that. I am worried about how long it'll take for Diana to appear. Mm-hmm. And also, just in general, because sometimes seasons don't work in shows, and they've had 2 pretty good seasons. Arguably the first one's still the best. Yeah. But I just wonder how the writing will change, because sometimes writers write towards actors' strengths. Mm-hmm. So that I'm curious. But there's something about the show that it still is something that I'm gonna be excited for until the end. Last but not least, Black Adam, release date 12/22/2021. We'll believe that when we see a trailer.
Yeah.
I don't. That show. So Mandalorian, let's get into it, Will.
Mandalorian. So it's first off, I really, just top lines, really enjoyed it. I think I liked the new little start of the program where they had the different masks, like they had 3PO and Darth Vader. Just a little. It was just a fresh way of saying, okay, we're gonna break from what we're used to with the crawl at the beginning of Star Wars. But the show itself, I couldn't help but think of Clint Eastwood and the Man with No Name trilogy as I was watching it. Just like that character, bounty hunter, didn't say much, but it was the, when you first are introduced to this show, it's Star Wars, so you got to have a bar, and a bar full of aliens, and so you had that. You had the entrance with the Mandalorian coming in, and basically one of the thing that sticks out of me from the first, I guess, 10 minutes of the show, you can come out warm or you can come out cold.
Right.
Yeah. That was what, other than the ending of the episode, that's the thing that stood out to me, as far as just, what we're going to get with this series.
So it was fine.
Yeah.
I'm not jumping up and down because it's a pilot, and everything that happened in the episode was exposition. And it just, the thing that threw me, honestly, is because in the trailers, at least the trailers I watched, he never said anything. Mm-hmm. And I was always wondering, I'm like, so is he going to be silent throughout the entire show? And within like a few frames, he starts talking. The mask never comes off. And it's even hinted out that Mandalorians never take off their masks. So now I'm doubtful that we're never going to see the beautiful Pedro Pascal's face in this show. And now here's my other problem. I am not sure of how good of an actor he is with the mask on, because that truly is a different skill set. It really is. Towards the end, he upped his game. He even had a comedic beat with the looking at something along with another character. That's besides the point. But there was just something that anytime he spoke, I was trying to get a little more emotion from it. Like some of his lines fell flat. And I would argue half of that is because his face is covered, and hey, sue me, but watch season 4 of Game of Thrones, and Pedro Pascal, he can deliver lines like monologues and tell stories, and I'm missing his eyes. And you know me, I'm like always drawn to how the actor expresses emotions without saying things, but through the eyes. We can't see his eyes, so maybe that's part of my problem. And something, as you were talking about your first impressions, my mind immediately snapped to the coolest part, arguably. Yes, the ending fight scene was amazing. I loved it too. But what really interested me and really following this character was the brief scene we had where he goes and turns in the metal, and into and you get a hint at Mandalorian culture.
Totally, because really what we know of the Mandalorian are basically Jango Fett, Boba Fett, and and that they're a warrior race. But you're right that whenever he took the Imperial tribute credit or whatever to the metalworks and handed it over to the other Mandalorian to forge his armor. That was very. I like that sequence as well, because it did give us some glimpse deeper into their culture, and as you said, and their backstory, and hopefully they will explore that some more, to really flesh this character out. Because you're right, it is harder to convey emotion, especially through a mask, and the voice was very modulated and electronic sounding when he did talk.
Okay, I thought that was just me for a little bit. I was like, did they screw up his voice too? Because he has a good voice. I don't understand.
Yeah.
But and even the scene before that, and actually, honestly, what threw me off is I agree. Every Star Wars content, you got to have a bar full of aliens, of course. But then they took it to Force Awakens, where And I'll admit I was scared. I was like, oh my God, I just got a flashback of the scene in Force Awakens that everyone forgets until you're actually watching Force Awakens, and you're like, oh, this is the part we going to the bathroom because it doesn't matter at all. It's the alien on the spaceship.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So that worried me. Later, when he's on the other planet and he encounters other aliens, that CGI was flawless.
Yeah.
Really liked that CGI. I felt it. But then it kept going and it turned into this weird horse whispering thing.
Yeah.
And I fell asleep. I was just,
yeah.
I don't understand that segment. Well, you got to explain it to me.
Yeah, I had to. Yeah, so I watched Mandalorian twice, and the first time, that was to me the week for me. The first time when I watched it, that's where I did fade. Yeah, it's not you. It was not you. I faded as well. I thought, given the way that the show had been built up to that point, there was so much momentum. The job that the client had hired him for. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden we slow down and get that scene and with the Ugnaught, and I'm just sort of like, Nick Nolte is great. We have, that's where voice really does come into play.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought he was a very interesting character, but just the way that it was sort of that middle interlude in the show that kind of killed some momentum that had been building up, and then of course we get the kick-ass ending. But yeah, I lost it there the first time around. Second time around, since I knew what was coming, I was able to appreciate the scene more, and I understand why it was put there, just to show, I guess, they're again talking about the culture. Mm-hmm. Because again, it was a lot of exposition, but the exposition was there. Look, you're a Mandalorian. Your ancestors were known as riding horses or being an expert at this stuff. So, again, it fleshes out race some more in this show that we, at least in the primary things that most people, probably most casual fan, only exposure has been in the prequels and Boba Fett and the Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Yeah.
I just, that part, I think I skipped over a few bits because it just kept going, and I'm like, I've seen this movie before. Take me to the next. Something that I did like is I did notice at the beginning how about his hate for droids.
Yes.
And I did not see it coming that at the end he would find himself teaming up with a droid or just randomly encounter another droid who was on the same mission and have to buddy up. And that really brought me in, because that is so Rogue One. Rogue One, the droid and the bounty hunter and just the way they choreographed their scene. There were some awkward moments, though. There was this one moment where they get out the machine gun, and then the Mandalorian kills the guy and takes over. And I feel like he took 2 paces and then he was out of the machine. And I'm like, where is everything?
Yeah.
He literally was right there. Like, are you kidding me? There was some scaling that I think got screwed up during the editing of the show. But my last question, though, for you, Will, is while watching it, I started to put together some pieces that whoever they're after is going to tie into the cinematic universe.
Definitely.
And I was already counting, and I'm like, okay, so is this, by the end of the series, is that going to be like the prologue into the Rise of Skywalker? Is that really what the Mandalorian purpose is, or what is this going to be? And it ends with Yoda.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that?
It's not Yoda. It's not Yoda.
Okay. Hey, it's a green Yoda-looking thing. I will call it Yoda if I want to.
It's not. It's Yoda and Yaddle's offspring. Remember Yaddle from Phantom Menace?
No.
She was on the Jedi. Yeah, so she was a Jedi. She was in the Jedi Council in Phantom. If you go back and watch it again,
we end up with a baby Yoda.
Yeah.
Yaddle's Yoda. Yeah. We end up with a baby. Yeah.
We've got a baby. We definitely have at the age. I was trying to calculate the timeline. So they said a 50-year-old. So I'm trying to think back. Force Awakens, would that be about 50 years earlier? Maybe from 5 years after Return of the Jedi.
I don't know.
That would be about right. That would be about right.
Yeah. I honestly, I mean, I like that moment.
Yeah.
I like how he kills the droid, even though we saw it coming. And there was something about it that was it was like E.T. They had an E.T. moment at the end.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I had that kind of like when the very first time I watched it, because I obviously they did an amazing job keeping this twist under wraps, especially in today's world. But yeah, I had the kind of ET vibes when I first saw Baby Yoda.
Yeah. And something else that I think is immediately grabbed me while I was watching is they made it very clear in the beginning, just because the Darth Vader and all of his goons are gone, does not mean that everything in the galaxy is right.
Correct. Yeah.
And so there was a lot of disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't harmony, it wasn't peace, or it wasn't at least the worlds that we were introduced to. And even Nick Nolte's character mentions that well, now these people are here and my peace is disrupted. And I like that, because that's a reminder that sometimes we think when the movie ends, all is right again.
Yeah.
Which is not true, because there's still assholes in the galaxy.
Yeah, there is. And to your earlier point about, what is this show setting up? One of the things that I thought is definitely was setting up is the First Order.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it, and because clearly the client sees, he knows about this Baby Yoda, and he wants, he sees himself as obviously the continuation of the Empire in his little part of the galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
And so clearly he sees this as a threat, but also that's one of the things that whenever we are first introduced in the First Order and the Force Awakens, we have all the vestiges of the Empire and the reconstructed Empire. I mean, all of the stormtroopers and their Star Destroyers, everything is just basically modernized versions of what we remember in the original trilogy. And so, one of the things the show I hope does get into, especially since it has already been renewed for a second season, is really helping us sort of flesh out and bridge that story, as you said, that all things aren't all well in the galaxy after the rebellion destroyed the second Death Star and the Empire seems to be disbanded.
Right.
Clearly it's not. And really, I think the show is probably going to like, hopefully, given that Jon Favreau is a very good storyteller, I'm hoping that he explores some of the politics of this disorder that has happened in the galaxy because the Empire is gone, and I think obviously the Mandalorian's mission, as far as protecting his baby Yoda, is going to be a part of that.
Yeah, I agree. Even though that I said it's fine, I'm also tired of the overhype or all of this is amazing, this is perfect, this is and I'm kind of exhausted by it, because I'm like, it's a well-made show.
Yeah.
Despite that opening alien sequence that I thought looked pretty crappy, it told the story. I didn't feel led by the trailers.
Mm-hmm.
It set it up. It got us started. I do agree with all of everyone's speculation that part of the reason why they're dropping the second episode early is because this was really an introduction.
Yeah.
And that has some little seeds to carry for the rest of season, but I'm not I'm not in it fully. And granted, it has some tough competition right now because you know what we're going to talk about next, Will. We're going to talk about some Watchmen, which continues to kick ass.
It does. It does. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. I agree. I mean, it served, it was a pilot. It definitely served its purpose as far as getting you into this world. I mean, obviously we're Star Wars fans, so we can, we're going to watch, and I think for me, I mean, I'm balled in. I see enough there, that I'll give it a pass on my 3-episode rule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's enough of familiarity with the universe in it, in the show, and also just visually, just the perfect blend of both practical effects and special effects. I thought they did that very well, and so I just really want to see, especially with that ending, I just really want to see how that again ties into, and I hope we get this, the origins of the First Order, and like you said, the disorder in the galaxy after the rebellion has fallen, and I think they did it. That's one of the good things that they did in this story, and talking about how Imperial credits aren't worth anything here, but at the same time, there is a power vacuum in the galaxy right now, and how that's going to unfold in this series is something I hope that they do explore.
Speaking of power vacuums in cities, let's get down to Oklahoma with Watchmen.
Yeah.
Very different episode. And I feel like I'm going to say this week after week because these are really chapters.
Mm-hmm.
They have a beginning and an end, and they do connect to the previous installments, but they still feel like an individual chapter, and they're really fleshing out the whole world in Tulsa through these different characters and these different perspectives on this town, frankly.
Yeah.
Total Superman vibes in the opening.
Yeah.
Oh man, they were all they even went as far as calling them the Clarks, and I'm like, I see what you did there. Totally. I gotcha. Nod. And it's all, and it feels also like a commercial, one of those stupid commercials about these two people, who are just trying to sell some eggs. And it's all leading up to the introduction of Lady True, who is the probably second cousin twice removed of White Rose.
Yeah, definitely got that vibe. White Rose, that's a perfect way to sum her up for folks who are familiar with White Rose from Mr. Robot.
She pulls it out. She's all about time. She's constantly looking at timing things, and you feel like everything she does is calculated.
It is. Yeah.
To the point where she can even apparently create life and give it away.
Yeah.
But it was a really unique opening.
Yeah.
Like cold open, and it got it done and introduced Lady True, and then we disappeared and we jumped right back into Angela's story, where Angela's story this episode, I'll admit, despite everything that happened with her and Fletcher in the previous episode, there was something about it that kind of stayed flat for me. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't also great. Mm-hmm. I felt like it was a very an episode where she started in one place, and everything that happened just made it so that she could end up in this other place by the end of it. And I don't know why I feel that way, but there was something off about it for me, where I feel like the previous episodes were stronger with her story and really fleshing her out as a character.
Yeah, I think I see your point there. I think this was an episode I didn't feel that way about her character. I think it was again building on, she's learning more about herself and building on this universe of who Angela Abar is, and her really trying to just figure out like why did Crawford get killed, and also who learning about her grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, I really liked, I'm glad they followed up on that point with the Tulsa massacre, and weaving the thread and learning a little bit more about her backstory as far as her great grandparents, and how and then how Will was also a police officer himself, and was in New York, and the time period is about the same time as some of the other original Watchmen characters, as far as Night Owl and some of the others. So again, he is again connecting it back to the original source material, even though this is obviously a continuation of that story. So I actually liked that. And the other thing that I thought was just a through thread line in this episode was just trauma, because you brought the opening,
right?
We had the trauma of the couple who were not able to conceive.
Uh-huh.
And then of course Lady True shows up with the brob, or not the brob, but the
baby.
baby. Yeah, with the baby to get their 40 acres, which another through line, which that again how the show ties into real world, and this Watchmen world, the whole 40 acres. And I started thinking 40 acres and a mule, thinking about Tulsa Massacre, and and post Civil War Reconstruction South, and did this family possibly get their thinking about their red predations and all those kind of things. It was just here's another little what's the backstory with them, but to my original point about the trauma, she's like, okay, all about you made the point about time, and she's like, you have the time in this hourglass to make your decision.
Right. Well, I actually think she said, for the next 3 minutes, you are the most important people on the planet.
Yeah, and she did say that too. Yeah.
Which, and I like how it's for 3 minutes. You either take the deal or you don't. And even if you do take the deal, you're still no longer important. Yeah. I've gotten what I want. And trauma, that's an interesting way to put it. I guess where I'm coming from is we start after the Clark story. We start right where we left off with the previous one, where we're following Angela, and we realize that when the car drops where she is, and so her and confront each other, and for the rest of the episode, it's all about tracking down the car, which ultimately does lead us back to True,
right.
Lady True. And then more importantly, it leads us back to Will, and continues to connect, or continues this mythos of Will. The mythos of Will, and who is he? Where did he come from? Why, as a kid? And it's there has to be a connection here. Please protect this boy.
Yeah.
Like I love that, and I love how they brought, like you were saying, that note out again, because the way they put that, it's very clear that somebody is orchestrating things, and I like that. I like that idea, because in one sense you can go the spiritual route of it, that there is somebody watching over us, and there's a lot of talk about gods on this show. I mean, people with superpowers are often equated to godlike beings, and they can either save people or they can destroy the whole world, and it's ultimately comes down to their morality. Yeah. So I think that's really good, but I also just like the idea that the writers are really moving the pieces in a way to tell this story that feels not calculated like Lady True.
Yeah. Yeah.
But very like an orchestra.
Yeah.
They are playing their music, and I will say it every time we cover Watchmen. I fast forward through everything that takes place in England.
You don't, because there is that through line of trauma, as I mentioned before. So of course, obviously, there's Blake and Angela's conversation in the car with Agent Petey in the back, talking about how, of course, Agent Blake was conceived potentially through rape, and and of course her comments that all superheroes have some kind of trauma in their childhood, that the mask is there to hide the trauma.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and then of course for Veidt, I think his trauma is the fact that he obviously he starts out with the cloning, which also ties back to Lady True, because Lady True bought his company, where he was, I guess he had a fertility clinic, which of course he's picking out these clones out of the lake, which was the most weird. It was a weird thing, I have to say. But in exploring some of his craziness in England, he seems trapped, and part of the reason why he's like launching the butlers off using the catapults and all that other stuff is he's trying to figure out a way to escape, to get into escape from whatever prison that Dr. Manhattan or whoever put him in this place. So he so that was the things that were going on with him while he was doing all those things. And there was the line in there from Lady True about Andrew Veidt and stuff. So they are starting to pull that connection together with what's going on in Oklahoma. So don't fast forward through those parts, because they actually they're starting to make connections to what else is going on in the show.
Oh, I'm sorry, Will. You're gonna always have to tell me what goes on in those parts. It's just not my cup of tea. It's not
I get it. I know it's hard. Yeah, because they were like he definitely treats his clones as disposable in every way.
There's just something about it that makes me not want to watch it. Like it takes me out, and even those connections. And sometimes I will stop and I'll just say, okay, dialogue. So maybe there are some ties, and I'm not clicking unpause at the right points or something. But it's just there's something about it where I'm suddenly taken out of the world, and also deeply disturbed in a way where I can either push through it and fast forward, or I might turn off the show, and I'd rather just keep the show on. So, that's just me. And again, and this honestly is probably not going to be my favorite episode when all is said and done. But I do think that we have a few more coming that are going to probably blow our minds from what I've heard. So I'm very excited. In other topics, I was very confused this week because I was fully prepared to watch Arrow and the Flash, only to realize they were on hiatus.
Yes, we talked about this. That it was this week that they're off. Yeah. The calendar.
You talked about this.
Yeah, your calendar is completely blown to hell. I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, there was some Arrow news this week. They did wrap production.
So that was, I was watching my timeline before we got on, and I saw some of Steven's tweets. And even though I'm kind of off the show at this point, there is something to be said where
I can't tell from your social media.
What do you mean?
You seem still very engaged, even though you're off the show.
From my social media? What did I do?
You're retweeting a lot of Arrow stuff, that's all.
Oh yeah, you guys do get my retweets. I don't know why I retweet certain things. I just, anyways, this is going to go on to a tangent that's not needed. My point being is that we would not be having this conversation without Arrow, and that's the honest truth, that this show truly, despite people's problems with the fan base, everyone who has watched this show for one character as another has found themselves on social media making connections, and it has really affected a lot of people's lives.
Yeah.
Not as many as Supernatural, I know. But it is kind of really interesting that this is the first time I've had a show to really impact me on that level.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, I think it definitely because of Arrow and its spin off the Flash. I mean, that's how we got to know each other, and it really did move the superhero game as much as the MCU has done it on the big screen. On the small screen, this show definitely, and I think even it has made lists. I think TV God, for example, did the most influential, I think, television shows of this decade, and Arrow is one of them, because it did indeed show that superheroes can work on the small screen if done the correct way. And so, yeah, I mean, its legacy is very, very far and very deep.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, now we have Batwoman on the show, and she's just starting up. And this week's episode, honestly, so it was the Executioner, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't the best episode.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. I mean, it's, we've talked about this before, and it's becoming very, very clear. And Alice, if they got to figure out what to do, because as I said, I think either last week or the week before last, when that Alice storyline runs out, they are going to be in a bind, because when they've tried these villains of the week, they're very weak.
Right. And Kate's relationship with her dad is starting to become redundant, where I really need to see them have a true father-daughter moment that isn't about Alice, their connection, their relationship, and their dynamic. There's so much animosity between them, not only about Alice, but about her choice not to join the Crows at the end of the first episode, and just how she was raised in a way where he was pushing her and he kept rejecting her, and how that could be tied into also feeling rejected by society because of her because she's a lesbian. So I think that they are primed to tell a really good father-daughter dynamic, and yet they are so caught up in this Alice thing that is so cliche right now. I really hope that they take a step back and realize that they have so much more to explore with Kate, and to really get us involved. I mean, I already don't like her relationship with Sophie, and the fact that now Sophie knows that she's Batwoman. I'm like, oh, great, that's stupid. Yeah. But I also am tired of people not knowing. So.
Yeah. Well, at this point, so we have Sophie that figured it out. Mary had the opportunity to figure it out, but she was the wise one who figured out, no, I don't think I need to know that right now, because that's going to complicate things. And that was the first time I've actually liked Mary in this series.
Oh my God, I love Mary.
I don't know. Is this something Mary's just not doing it for me, but I did like her this week. I think Ruby is really starting to feel more comfortable, as Kate. Even though the episode overall had its problems this week, I thought her performance was good, and I think she's continuing to grow into the character. So I think that was a good thing. But really, this episode other than the noteworthy thing of, at least in this universe, their Joker is Jack Napier, which is a nice tie-in um, back to Batman '89, which of course we know is going to be in crisis. So it's a nice way of integrating some of the stories in there, and maybe I guess their Bruce is Michael Keaton. But other than that, I mean, this episode, whenever we look back on the first season, yes, it's definitely not going to be one to stand out, and for the very reasons that you mentioned.
Yeah. I still watch it, and I still haven't watched Supergirl.
I haven't either. And people were saying Supergirl is good this week, but it's just like, all right, I'm watching Jeff Goldblum at this point. So
it's content. I mean, now that there's another streaming service with original content to compete with, and Netflix is about to drop the crown, if you haven't been consistent, people might not come back.
Yeah.
You get your chance, and if you screw it up, if you stumble, then viewers might leave.
Yeah, but one thing I have been consistent on has been Black Lightning, and I'm glad that I have been. This season has been really, as I said before, really, really strong. This week definitely continues that. Again, I think you're talking about content being the key. Again, the show is not shy about tying in real world issues. I mean, there was definitely a moment that was very Rodney King in this week with the occupation of Friedland, where Jefferson was trying to, the ASA officers were basically bullying and trying to break up a protest at the school because Tavon was missing, and who was mistakenly identified as a meta, which he's not. And so, there was that aspect of it. But the real thing that stood out this week was, spoiler alert if you haven't watched it. Sarah, have you watched it?
No, I'm still behind. Okay. I don't know if I've told you this. I moved city.
I know. You had it on the rundown, so I didn't know if you had watched it.
I know. I'm gonna keep it on the rundown because I know you're obsessed with it, and I'm envious that I didn't have smart viewing choices at the beginning of this fall season, and so I took it off when I should have kept it on and maybe dropped Supergirl sooner. I don't know, but and that's another thing is you may drop a show, and then because 2 other shows dropped new that you already are want to go back into that universe, you may not be able to go back.
Yeah.
I'll get to it it eventually.
Well, there's a definite spoiler that I don't want to ruin it for you, dealing with
I'll forget it. So
I'm not going to ruin it. It's
okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty obvious. It's one that you probably would see coming, dealing with Lynn, and I'll just leave it, and working in the ASA lab.
Lynn and Gamby.
Yeah.
And Mr. Baby.
There you go. Not your fan fiction. Not your fan fiction.
You just said that I saw it coming, and that is the thing I have saw it coming since day one.
Well, it involves Tobias, and I'll just leave it there.
Tobias
what? Yeah.
Brother and sister?
No. But
cousins twice removed?
No. He something
knocking boots?
Yeah. No. It was like a Batwoman moment where he figured out something. He figured out that Jefferson was Black Lightning.
Oh, so you misled me because you said Lynn and Tobias, but he figured out that Black Lightning is Jefferson because of Lynn.
Because of Lynn and
Lois Lane 101.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh man, interesting. I guess I won't return until my fan fiction comes true.
Okay.
Well, that was bound to happen. It's just like, despite my issues with what they're doing on this whole Alice and Kate on Batwoman situation, Alice knew from the very beginning that Kate was Batwoman. And in Black Lightning, I mean, Tobias and Jefferson have been at odds forever. And so it's kind of like, Tobias, wake up, dude. Yeah. It's right in front of you. So,
it took him 3 seasons. At least they waited 3 seasons. I mean, because he had a call back to the first season where, Black Lightning always shows up with your daughters, Lynn. Why is that?
I don't know. It's not like they have a dad.
Yeah.
All right. Clearly, we are in territory that means post-show. So on that note, I think we're going to call it a night. Will, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me at Will M. Polk. That's WILLMPOLK.
And you can find me at SJ Belmont, SJBELMONT. Please follow our crew on Twitter at CNN Nerd. Friend us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. But most importantly, rate, subscribe, and comment on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Spotify. Good night, Geek Out. You're welcome.